every single person I've ever seen gets healthier whenever they do that, because we're not having to deal with preservatives. Everything that goes in our body recognizes, and it can process that stuff better. Take the concept of it and you say, like, let me start at the top and eat until I'm full. And if I'm not full, then let me go to like the middle layer and let me go down and go down. I think you're eating a lot of really healthy things. Hey everyone, Derrick Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Good day, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Pain and Performance Podcast, where I try to take the latest research, technology, and information and kind of give you that in a way that you can improve your health in your life, whether that be healing or that be improving health, function, fitness, or longevity. If you don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Derrick Hines. I founded Pain and Performance Rehab, where we integrate the best treatments, hands-on technology, and the latest innovations in healing. And we do that to help our patients here in the office, but this is an extension of that. So today on the Pain and Performance Podcast, we're talking about some pretty exciting stuff that has happened. And I think this is a good thing because we've all talked about how bad the old food pyramid was and how we put all this information out. And at some point it ended up leading to, quite significant health problems for our country. And so we have a new food pyramid, and they're calling it the upside down food pyramid for the reasons that you can see. And that is because we are looking at the flip side of what we should eat a lot. And I think this is really smart in a lot of ways, where we're putting like the protein and healthy fats, the fruits and vegetables up here, where it's like, hey, eat a lot of this stuff. And then you kind of start getting down here into your higher sugar fruits, maybe your, really dense fats. And then way at the bottom, we start looking at the whole grains that used to be like, hey, you can get a whole bunch of these things. And when we look at this, it's like there's some small, subtle changes in what they're actually recommending from a daily serving standpoint. So they actually increased the recommendation of vegetables from like the old guidelines being like 2.5 cups to 3 cups. Fruit stayed the same. One of the big changes, of course, was grains. So they cut the recommended amount of grains basically into 1/3 of what they used to recommend in the old food pyramid. So bring those way down, still with a big emphasis on whole grains. And then another one of the biggest changes we see is on meats, where they've basically doubled the recommended amount of meats. And a lot of this has been to show like we were over relying on these like kind of poor, protein dense foods. We were eating a lot of refined carbohydrates, or at least being recommended to eat a lot of refined carbohydrates. And we weren't getting nearly enough protein and healthy fats. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I have this like affinity for healthy fats, and I think we should change the name of them. But anyway, that's for a different story. But when we look at this, I like what this is doing for people. When we look at this and you like start to go through on protein, 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram. If y'all have been listening, we talked about how much protein you need, and a recent study that took people from this range, the 1.2 versus the 1.6, and found that if you eat the 1.6 grams of protein, that will get you about 30% more muscle mass and 10% more strength. So definitely be on the higher end of this as we're tracking kind of what the studies show, but this isn't a bad ratio. I think we should probably lean much higher to the 1.6 because people are going to miss some days, and they should with that. If we're shooting for the 1.2 and we're missing, we're going to be under protein fed, and we're going to have trouble with muscle mass for sure. So, when we look at some of the other things that I thought that really stood out to me, it's telling people like the amount of sugar that we should be getting, and trying to avoid that as much as we possibly can. That's not something that we need in our diet by any stretch of the imagination. But if we look at this and all you do is take the of it, and you say like, let me start at the top and eat until I'm full. And if I'm not full, then let me go to like the middle layer and let me go down and go down. I think you're doing a lot of really healthy things. Now, one of the things that you look at on here is there's very few packages, right? All of these are whole, real foods. And if we're looking for one big shift that we can make, I think that eating the real food is the most important thing. Whenever you look at people who have done, like 75 hard or any of these like major diet things, and we go away from packaged foods and we start eating, whole or minimally processed foods, every single person I've ever seen gets healthier whenever they do that, because we're not having to deal with preservatives. Everything that goes in our body our body recognizes, and it can process that stuff better. So there's very few packages on here, and it really stands out to a lot of people that is important. This is not bad. I'm sure, you could look at any of these things and say like, could we make it better? Of course. But if we get, from a very basic standpoint, if we get the rough guide of this right, I think most people are healthy. Is like, if we eat this, for the most part, dietarily, we're going to be healthier than if we eat the old food pyramid, and then definitely if we eat the standard American diet, which if you looked at it on this, it's tons of processed packaged food, high sugar foods, and so I like this. Let me know what you think about it if you looked at it and thought about the recommendations or the dietary guidelines that they've put out on this. This is the first time that I look at something that has been put out, as kind of a major recommendation that I was like, okay, you didn't completely miss on that. That's not too bad. But I'd love to hear what y'all think about some of this stuff. And if there was any major takeaways that you would take from this. I remember learning the food pyramid whenever I was young. And I don't remember it heavily influencing anything that we ate or anything that we thought about eating, but it definitely seeps in, and you start to create these small decisions that can be made of like, is something healthy or not healthy? And if it's in your face and it's seen a lot, look, we've definitely seen that with fats. There was a very big push against fats. We've definitely seen that with meat. There's a big push against meat. And the studies just haven't held up to a lot of the scrutiny for either one of those. And so I'm glad that they put this out. I'm sure it will create some conversations. I definitely wanted to share it with y'all. Go take a look at it. You can go to realfood.gov and you can find out about that. But take a look at it. I think it's interesting that we are starting to talk about these things, and that alone makes me happy. So yeah, take a look. Let me know what you think, folks.